Hey, what's up, everybody? It's David here with Tough Guys TV, and on this episode, we are going to be talking about this chicken coop by Nestera. Now, this in particular coop is called the Wagon, and in this video, we're going to be going through the unboxing and the complete step-by-step assembly. Now, in our part two, we're going to be covering getting the chickens actually here to the land. They're not here yet, so I hope you'll stay tuned for that video as well. But in the meantime, let's get started with this one. First up, I want to show you guys where we decided to put the coop. Now we have this small little area behind our workshop that has a cedar tree. It gets a good amount of shade in the morning that extends well into the afternoon, so that's a good thing. It has a space behind where we can build a chicken run, so that's where they're going to go. Next up, let's discuss the unboxing. You're going to get 3 packages at least, one of which will have your instructions. Make sure you save those. The other 2 packages are a lot larger. You'll see those here in a second. This shows you the texture on the outside, and then on the inside of all the pieces, it's going to be a smooth finish. So that's an easy way to tell which ones are which. You've got a couple of support bars for the wheels. Now they also include a few pieces of wood for your roosting bars. I think that's a nice touch. And then all 4 wheels are packed into one box. Nice, lightweight. They have a nice rubber coating. Get that box out of the way. Then you've got a bonus box. This one actually has all of the hardware. So I set that to the side for now so I could open up the larger boxes. It looks like these pieces of plastic were cut out of a giant CNC machine. At least that's what I imagine. But you have roof panels, side panels, the base panels. Any of the walls or roof panels all have a smooth side on the inside again, and the rough will be on the outside. To be honest, there were a lot more components than I had expected, so I recommend you have plenty of space to spread everything out and check the instructions to make sure you have all of the components that you're supposed to. Now, once I got all the larger pieces situated in the shop, I spread out all those nuts and bolts so I could sort of take stock before we planned out assembly. Now, my goal here in spreading everything out was really just to get an idea of what I was up against for the install. You have these pie clips that essentially hold all the panels together. You'll see those more when we get outside. And then you have this big bag of nuts and bolts, which definitely make sure you have that somewhere secure. But yeah, we're going to set up outside next. Now, I decided to do my prep and assembly outside. Now, if you had a big enough workshop, I suppose you could do it inside. I did have all the smaller components into a bin so I wouldn't lose anything. But yeah, if you don't have an area to spread everything out, it's going to be a rough go of it. On the tailgate of my truck, I spread out everything I was going to need to assemble it. I also grabbed a cordless drill. This is my drill by Bosch. I also grabbed a tool pouch, and I do have the automatic coop opener, so I went ahead and brought that out, as well as the instructions. Now, I decided to start with the vent doors, and depending on your coop, it may or may not instruct you to do so, but in my case, you did. So you basically you're going to start by putting a bolt through the front, then your washer and your locking nut on the back side. Now, you don't want this to be too tight, otherwise you won't be able to open it and close it when you need to adjust the airflow, but you also don't want it to be too loose either, so watch out for that. Here's an up close of how those pie clips look. These clips are used to secure the panel sections together. In this case, we're going to start with the bottom and the sides. You can see they have these little cutouts along the perimeter edge, and that's where you put the clips. I'm not sure if there's a right way or a wrong way here, but I decided to always insert the clip with the little arms of it facing downward. It just seemed to me that that made more sense, and if it was on the outside wall edge, I would face those little legs inward. I don't know if that makes sense. You'll kind of see as I go here how I decided to install them. Next up was the front and back panels. I was getting into some fire ants because I was doing this outside, so I used some of the cardboard from the packaging to elevate it and give myself a nice flat surface. Now, setting up the front and rear panels are very similar to the base and the side panels that we started with. It's just a bunch of the pie clips that are going to secure these in place. Make sure that you lay out all of them in advance so you do not miss any of these spots. Another thing to note here is that that textured finish is always facing out and the smooth finish is always on the inside. Now, this next section is for the roof supports. I decided to keep this in order as I went through the process in real time. And when I started putting this together, I noticed a couple of things. First of all, the upper roof supports, which you have 2 of them, mine do not have the little nodules, you could say, like the plans showed that I had printed out. Mine were actually a smooth finish. Now, I fixed this by going to Nestera's website and downloading the new PDF plans. So we're going to circle back to the roof later. At this point, I decided to move forward with the wheel assembly. You've got these 4 sleeves that are going to go over the posts. Then, of course, you have 4 wheels and you have your locking rings. So basically, you thread one of your sleeves on, you push the post through, Make sure you pop it out the other side. Then you slide your wheel on, and once you have the wheel in place, there's another washer, and then you put your locking ring in there. I'm going to show it again here on the right side of the front so you can see how it goes on. This process is pretty simple, but probably would have been easy with somebody to help. Now, in my package, they did include one extra sleeve, so I guess if you had one that was lost, you would be good to go there. Next up is the nesting box. This also assembles with the pie clips, so you'll have two side panels, a base, a front, and then a middle panel. Once you get the entire thing assembled, again, textured side facing out, you're going to set it onto the back of the rear panel. It locks in place with the same locking rings that you put the wheels on with. Next up is the lid. We're going to circle back to the weather strip at the top of the lid later. So for now, this is just the lid assembly. You're going to use more of the pie clips to basically put the frame underneath the top of the lid. The lid has the same coating as the roof side, so that would be the side that faces outward. It clips into the top of the nesting box and locks in place at the bottom. You have a little eyelet for later, so you can put one of those locking rings in there to hold it in place once you have everything set up. Now, next up, we're going to be moving on to the front door assembly. In my opinion, this was the most difficult section. There's a good percentage of this that is using the pie clips. So you're going to have the supports for the door, but you also need to set up the latches and the hinges. So make sure you lay out all the components that you're going to need. Now, for the latches and hinges, I did not tighten down the bolts all the way because I wanted them to have some movement up and down for later so I can align the door. One last note on the hinges is I only put in two of the screws for now so that I could easily adjust them later on. Next up, I moved to assembling these rails, which are going to go in place to kind of sandwich around where your coupe opener door would go. So I went ahead and laid out all of the bolts with the washers and the locking nuts. And then you stack these two sections together to create a channel in which the opener can slide the door up and down. Now, even if you didn't have the opener, the automatic opener, you would still be able to open this manually, which is that little lock lever you see me placed in there just to make sure I had it spaced correctly. We kicked off day two, and this time I had a helper. This is my son, Memphis, so he decided to hang out for the day. We are moving on to the roof supports now because I finally have the correct instructions from the website. Those need to go 3 slots up on either side, and yes, they're supposed to be smooth. The first thing to do now is to put in these little attachment pieces for the roof. There are pre-cut holes all the way around the front and the back, as well as pre-cut holes for these handles. Those are used just so you can move the coupe more easily around once everything is assembled. All of these install with the pie clips. You put them all across the front and all across the back. These are where the roof panels are going to lock onto here in a few minutes. Quick note, if it looks like the front and rear panels are a little bit droopy or warped, it's because it was sitting in the sun for a few days. But rest assured, once I got everything installed and everything was together with the roof panels, all of that droopiness went away. I did one final check to make sure all of the pie clips were seated nice and neat before moving on to the waterproofing strip on the back of the nesting box. So if you remember earlier, we assembled the lid, but we didn't put this in. So this is the weather strip that they include. It's got a little node of rubber on the back that you're going to press into this groove. Now, what worked for me was to actually flex the back panel forward and it opened up that groove a little bit. I pressed the weather stripping in and then I released the flex back towards myself and it held super tight. With that installed, the last thing you'll need to do is put your clips in. Don't forget about those. Now we're moving on to what I would call the second hardest part, which was installing the interior support frame around the door opening on the front side. I guess that's what I'm going to call it because that's really what it felt like it was going to do. They do want you having the screws facing out. This was something that I think you could easily do incorrectly because it doesn't really feel right to do it this way, but that's how they call out for it. Next up, you need to install these little parts that hold your door latches in place. I did the same thing I did with the latches themselves. I put the bolts in, but I left everything a little bit loose. So that way, once I get the door mounted on here with the hinges, I can adjust these up or down to align with the latches as I need to. I think this is a good strategy because just in general, it's not good to over tighten anything when the base system of this is plastic. Moving on to the roof panels, I pre-set up all of my bolts with those rubber washers so that they were ready to go. And then I lined up my panels. I set them up against the fence. It was just easier to do them while they're standing up here. I did the top 3 bolts on each side to get everything together. Then I had my son help me do the bottom 2 on each side. And for this, it did make things faster to use the drill. I definitely recommend having help for the roof panel section. Even if you choose to do the rest of the build by yourself, make sure you get somebody to help you. And one quick note on using a drill is make sure you have your torque turned down because otherwise you're going to blow through the back of the plastic panels. Now we brought the panels over back to the coop and we lifted them up over the top and then just started pressing it down onto those little clips. I'm not sure really what to call them, but once they press through the pre-cut holes, I put those little ring bolts in there and it held everything in place. This is another step where having somebody to help you is extremely important. It definitely doesn't like to flex down. They think did this by design because they wanted everything to be rigid when it was finished up, and it definitely feels like putting the roof panel on just adds a ton of rigidity to the system. So it's important that you get everything nice and secured with the roof. One last step was you have to bend these front corner pieces down into these little grooves on the front panel. So if you don't do that, you're going to be creating a little air gap in there for bugs. Next up, we grab that door panel that we put together previously and we set the hinges in place. So I did the top first so I could just keep it secured, and then I did the bottom. For this, I decided to use a screwdriver. Again, I'm trying to really avoid over tightening anything with the hinges or the latches because those are going to get a lot of work over time. Now, once I had both of the hinges in place, the last thing to do was to make sure that the door opened and closed like it should, and I did have that opener door slid in place. Now, this is a little ramp that allows the chickens to get onto the inside. You basically attach the two side rails with more of the pie clips, and then the top section just kind of folds forward so that you can give it a little bit of an angle. It installs with these little clips, but for now, we don't have this on the coop because we still need to figure out where it's going to go exactly. Now, installing the automatic opener is really simple. There's four screws around the outside that screw it into the front of the door, and then there's four screws on the front of it that you take off the front panel to put the batteries in place. Once that's in, you can program it to your liking. There's some really good instructions in the package. I didn't want to bog you down with that here for the video. After that, we checked the door one more time just to make sure everything was still functioning. It had been on the coop now for about a day, so again, nothing has warped or shifted. In fact, everything just feels tighter after having the roof installed onto it. So yeah, what are my thoughts about this coop by Nestera? Well, I think first of all, when you're dealing with composite material like this and not something that's made of wood and you've got a 25-year warranty, it's just a huge peace of mind for me. I do not like having to fix stuff all the time out here on the land. And chicken coops, I have done my fair share of fixing and repairing and building them over the years. If you follow the channel at all, you know that we have had tons of time spent dealing with chicken coops. So, quality wise, customer service, availability of everything you need online, to me, just makes this a win. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope it helped you if you have one of these coops by Nestera. And I hope that you'll stay tuned for part 2 when we get the chickens finally back to the land. And inside the coop, we're going to go over the full setup process that we did there to get the chickens comfortable, and you'll get to see how this thing operates. So I hope you stay tuned for that. As always, there'll be links down in the description below for you to get to this coop and everything else that Nestera offers, as well as some links that will help support the channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next video.